Alright guys, Murphs here, and today I want to talk about MOA and its application in shooting, definitions, all that type of stuff, as well as my opinions when it comes to accuracy expectations. It's kind of a two-part video. We have the beginning where it's going to be very technical, a lot of different facts and all that kind of stuff being thrown out there. And then we're going to get a little bit more contextual whenever it comes to accuracy expectations. So that's a very opinion-driven portion of the video. I will outline in the description where it is different parts of the video pick up so that you guys can go ahead and jump ahead to the information that you actually want to get, leave behind the things that you don't, maybe come back and check them out at another time if you're curious. All right, so with those things out of the way, let's go ahead and start defining what MOA is. So minute of angle is what MOA stands for. And this is an angular measurement. This is actually breaking down a degree into its smaller form. So there are 60 minutes in a single degree, 360 degrees in a circle. Now, a minute measures out to roughly 1.047 inches at 100 yards. Now, the vast majority of the time, you'll hear MOA represented as 1 inch at 100 yards, specifically because that 0.047 at the short to intermediate ranges doesn't really make a difference. However, once you start shooting out to long ranges, that 0.047 really starts to add up and does have a bearing on the calculations that you're making. For our purposes today, we're primarily going to think within 1 MOA at 100 yards. All right, so that's the definition of MOA. How is MOA used in shooting? Well, it's used in actually a couple of different ways. So first off, we use it to measure group sizes, which you would fire a couple of shots at 100 yards. You would go down, measure from center to center, and from there you would be able to extrapolate the rifle's accuracy at 100 yards. Now the key thing is that MOA always comes back to 100 yards. So let's say you're shooting 1 inch at 100 yards. You would now expect that you would be shooting 2 inches at 200 yards in order to be able to maintain a 1 MOA standard. Now, if you were to reach out to say 300 yards and all of a sudden your grouping measured 6 inches across, you would no longer have a 1 MOA rifle. You would actually have a 2 MOA rifle. You'd do the math, break 300 down to 100, and you would wind up with 2-inch expectation for that load or that rifle at that distance. That's kind of the contextual aspect of MOA. Now, there are a couple of different standards whenever it comes to groupings. Some people shoot 3-shot groupings and measure their rifle's accuracy from that. Some people fire 5-shot groups and measure from that. And like Olympic level shooting is 10-shot groups. That's the standard at that level. A lot of times people will talk trash on 3-shot groups, saying that it's not enough information, and though more rounds do give you more information, at the end of the day I can make a lot more 3-shot groups out of a 20-round box than I can 5 or 10-shot groups. So it's something important to keep in mind in this kind of contextual aspect of things. The 3-shot group still gives you information. Anything over 2 shots gives you information. So the important thing becomes, how much information are you gathering out of it? Can you extrapolate enough to be able to get what you want out of that rifle? If you were to shoot several 3-shot groups with the same load, you could then eliminate the possibility that the shooter is causing the issue and really get a better understanding of what the inherent accuracy is of the rifle while having more ammunition to be able to do more testing, or more loads available to be able to do more testing with the rifle. That's something to take into account. I prefer to do 5-shot groups because I think it's a really good middle ground, and it gives a lot of data without expending too much ammunition. Now, another way that you can express MOA is actually in ranging. So let's say that you have a target of known size at an unknown distance. You can actually utilize really any fiduciary within your reticle, or even if you're using iron sights or something like that, anything of a known size that you're utilizing for the purpose of aiming can be used to be able to extrapolate how far your target is. Now, in the case of MOA, you can go ahead and let's say you have MOA hash marks in your reticle, though you can do the same thing with mil rad or mil dot. You could measure that target and then from there be able to, based on however many hash marks or whatever it is that it's covering up, you can be able to determine how far that is away. Now, how easy that is based on how much information you have represented in your reticle in order to be able to more accurately gauge the size and therefore the distance. There's that association there. So we can use it to estimate accuracy, and we can use it to estimate distance. We can also utilize it to be able to make corrections on the fly. Same thing, MOA, same thing with mil dot and mil rad and all that kind of stuff. You fire a round at a target. let's say it impacts one hash mark left, one MOA hash mark left at 200 yards. You can now adjust utilizing your actual scope adjustments. You can dial that in and then hold center mass for your next round in order to be able to get that good center impact. So in this case, since it impacted one MOA left at 200, you would adjust 2 MOA to the right. So something to keep in mind also is that with your turret adjustments, you have 1 MOA, half MOA, quarter MOA, all kinds of different measurements. So from there, you're going to have to adjust the appropriate amount to be able to equal the inch or whatever distance it is that you're trying to make up in order to be able to make that adjustment and get that center line hold. Now, if you have, let's say, a mil-rad or mil-dot or whatever reticle, you might have to do a little bit of math in order to be able to translate that over to MOA to be able to make adjustments on MOA turrets. Just something to keep in mind. It's not impossible, it's just something that you might have to do. Now, of course, you can also just use that same data if you're trying to do this engagement rapidly and then just hold on that adjustment line instead of changing your turrets at all. It's all a question of what type of shooting it is that you're trying to do. If you're doing rapid combat type shooting, those BDC or other types of reticles become a little bit more handy. Now, in addition to that, like I said before, any fiduciary gives you information. Iron sights have a known measure. You can determine the measurement of your iron sights and be able to make those adjustments at range, probably with the help of a spotter, because it's going to be difficult to spot impacts at great distances with iron sights. However, there are all kinds of long-range shooters who do this continuously. In fact, if you guys ever watched 9-Hole Reviews, excellent content, and he does all kinds of that type of shooting, and you'll sometimes hear him communicating how it is that he's adjusting based off of the width of his front sight. Now, you can also do that same kind of thing with like red dots, which is something that I do quite frequently. The vast majority of shooting that I do is close range stuff, but I like to be able to flex my rifles out to greater distances, so I use red dots to be able to do both of those types of shooting. And when I'm talking about a close range reticle, I want something that's fairly simple, that doesn't confuse the eye, and is very easy to go ahead and drive towards that target. Whenever you try to use those at greater distances, you can still utilize the dot to be able to read some information. So let's take my Galil, for example. It has a 250-yard zero on it. I know that at 200, I am 8 inches high. So with a 2 MOA red dot, the Comp M2 that I have mounted on it, that would the 2 MOA at 200 yards covers 4 inches. So 2 dots below whatever it is that I'm trying to impact is 8 inches, roughly. Now, keep in mind, this is combat expedient math. This is not necessarily super precise and all this type of stuff. This is something that you can read very quickly, make an adjustment, and then adjust your hits as you read them from there. And that's something that I prefer to do. But if I'm consistently fighting at greater distance, that's where something like an ACOG, something with a BDC reticle and a measuring capability becomes exceedingly handy. A lot of the PU scopes that you find on like the Dragunov or the PSL, those are really handy for being able to have a ranging a measure off to the side that you can utilize to be able to measure the average Eurasian male and then be able to determine your distance off of that and make adjustments on the fly as you start sending in rounds. That's a type of shooting, and it's something to keep in mind. Whereas if you're doing more precision type shooting, you might actually want to dial your turrets and all that kind of stuff so that you maintain the same point of aim and then dial to it, get your adjustments that way, and have a more precise engagement. This is a case where you're trying to hit somebody right inside of that heart box, and you want to make sure that you have all the appropriate data to be able to do so. Now, that's a lot of the fundamentals of utilizing MOA in different types of shooting. What about the opinion-driven portion of this, Murph? All right, accuracy expectations. Let's go ahead and get into this. I have very different accuracy expectations than an awful lot of people. If you look at a lot of print media or a lot of stuff on YouTube, it seems like every rifle is a 1 MOA rifle. Now, a lot of that has to do with where we're at with technology, to where we can produce highly repeatable, very accurate rifles with ever lower price tags because, you know, metallurgy and machining capabilities and all that kind of stuff have just reached that point. However, accuracy ultimately comes down to 3 factors: shooter, rifle, and bullet. And as much as people know that it takes these 3 things, I think the context that it takes for these 3 things to come together really gets lost by boiling it down to just these 3 points. So take the rifle, for instance. Your rifling type, your turn, your twist ratio, that's what I'm looking for, your twist rate, Barrel material, whether or not it's coated, barrel profile, action, if it's is it semi-automatic, is it single shot, all those types of things. Gas system, if it's semi-automatic. The trigger plays a part. How adjustable is the stock? The optics that you're utilizing. Are you using high-powered optics? Or are you using iron sights? It's a lot easier to shoot. It doesn't make you a better shooter, but it's easier to shoot tighter groupings if you're actually able to observe that you're holding the same consistent point of aim, because that's the key thing in shooting. Your ability to be able to get stable and all that kind of stuff. All those things play into the accuracy on just the rifle portion of it. When we talk about the bullet, now we're talking about design, profile, grainage, seating depth, velocity, type of propellant used as far as burn rate is concerned, and all those types of things. The chamber, whether or not it's matching up appropriately, 5.56 versus 2.23 versus 2.23 wild, all those types of things. Kind of getting back a little bit into rifle, but you see the same type of concern, whatever it is that you're crossing between ammunition. And then the shooter is probably the most frequent failure point whenever you're talking about, like, you know, consistency, whether or not they're able to get behind the gun and be consistent. So that means that they can adjust it to them accordingly in case they're really tall or they're really short, that they're not being recoil shy shooting a heavy recoiling cartridge, that they have good shooting fundamentals and all those types of things, and they're having a good day with their shooting fundamentals, because there's some days that I'm super switched on and there's some days where it's just not quite linking up with me, and all those types of things. And that's what we're trying to represent whenever people are doing these types of reviews. Whether their eyesight or in general their physical capabilities are actually up to being able to get those types of, squeeze those types of those levels of accuracy out of the rifle and all those types of things. There's a lot of stuff that comes into being able to shoot a rifle accurately. I think it's frequently misrepresented. Now, what also comes in this kind of contextual debate overall is, what target are you engaging? And is one MOA really your only pursuit? So for me personally, I prefer to think of accuracy in a very basic manner. I have guns that I want a minimum of 4 MOA out of, and I have guns that I have a 1 MOA expectation out of. That's it. Now, when it comes to fighting type rifles and all that kind of stuff, I expect well, I guess you would really, in this case, call it a maximum of 4 MOA. If it's shooting 4 MOA, it's meeting my accuracy expectation that rifle's good to go. Now, some people might be sitting here going, 4 MOA, are you crazy? But think about it. How far am I engaging? The furthest range I have to shoot at right now is just over 400 yards. So, with a 4 MOA expectation, at 400 yards, I can engage a 16-inch target. Well, the average man is 18 inches across for his torso region, so I am well within minute of man at that point. This is perfectly acceptable to me. And if you look at this, it's actually reflected in military doctrine as well, because militaries have more and more moved to shorter rifle systems. Long gone are the days of 20-inch rifles and all that kind of stuff. Now we're seeing 14.5s at the longest, all the way down to 10.3s, 11.5s, all that kind of stuff. These rifles are expected to be able to engage out to 300 yards. So if we were maintaining a 4 MOA standard for a 300-yard engagement, we're talking about a 12-inch target that we can engage. That is substantially smaller than an 18-inch target that we expect with a man-sized target. That's pretty good. Not every rifle has to be 1 MOA all the time. Now, in addition to that, a lot of that comes down to what ammunition it is that you're shooting. Guys, ammunition is already hard to come by. So if I had to stock training type ammunition and match type ammunition purely for the purpose of shooting groups to show on YouTube, I would go broke really fast. That would impact how much time I could actually spend on the range, how often I would actually be able to recoup my losses on ammunition. And keep in mind, guys, YouTube demonetized gun channels, so this channel doesn't bring me money. It actually only costs me money at this point. So the ability to be able to keep the channel going is entirely dependent on my ability to keep ammunition in magazines. So there's a dynamic to be struck there. You know, a lot of the time I'm shooting 55 grain ammunition, regardless of what rifle it is that I'm shooting to have, when in the 5.56 realm, as long as it stabilizes that bullet, I'm fine with that. And that's the accuracy that I'm going to have on hand to be able to represent. If I'm shooting Barnaul or something like that, that's because that's the ammunition I can find, that's the ammunition I have in magazines, and most importantly, from a contextual standpoint, that's what you're probably going to be shooting as well. I want to show you what the rifle's going to do when you're actually using it. Same type of deal, like I don't have a single high-powered optic that I rotate throughout rifles to be able to express accuracy. It's uninteresting to me. Plenty of people have already done that on a lot of these rifle reviews. Go find their channels, watch their videos, watch them squeeze out 1 MOA groups with 77 grain hand loads or something like that out of their AR-15s. That's fine, fantastic. I'm glad you guys wanted to find and sought that out. Great. Here, we won't be doing that. I'm going to show you what the rifle actually gets out of a practical use. When you take it to the range, when you take it to a course, perhaps you're shooting high round count competitions with that rifle and you need ammunition that's cheap and plentiful, this is what that rifle is going to look like, and that's what I plan on showing you guys. Your red dot. Red dots are not necessarily the best idea for 100-yard accuracy, but you'll be able to see it on this channel. You'll be able to see what you can expect with the red dot, that rifle combination with plinking grade ammunition. Whenever I see somebody go on about how it is that their hand loads are turning something in, I immediately lose interest because I don't have their hand loads. So it's really not quantifiable data to me. It's not something that I can go out and repeat. Whereas if somebody comes out and they show me what the rifle's getting with factory ammunition, factory even plinking grade ammunition, now I have data that I can work with. There's something that I can project from that. Now, of course, there are some rifles that I do expect to be able to turn in a little bit better than 4 MOA, like whenever we get into DMRs and stuff like that. But if you have checked out my video on that, on the DMR concept specifically, I'm still fine with 4 MOA on a DMR because that's putting my expectations into alignment at that point. Sometimes DMRs are just service rifles with optics, so it's completely believable that we'll wind up with a 4 MOA engagement out of that rifle when 4 MOA was acceptable for the average infantryman. Having a DMR is not just about being able to engage, it's also about being able to identify enemy targets, to be able to coordinate fires and all that kind of stuff, or provide somebody with distance, direction, and description. Those are just as important as the shooting aspect of a DMR. Now, 1 MOA rifles are precision-minded type rifles, long-range type setups, which I've been looking to get into, and I do have some rifles that are able to replicate that type of engagement. 1 MOA is the expectation. Sub-MOA is the goal, ultimately. But I don't hand load, so I'm still working off of factory ammunition, and it's still expensive to get decent match-grade factory ammunition, no matter what caliber it is that you're shooting. So I still have to keep a certain amount of my expectations in line whenever it is that I'm looking at these options. Guys, the biggest thing that I want to get across to you with this is that it's okay to have a rifle that's not 1 MOA. It's okay to have a slightly more realistic expectation of what accuracy it is that you want to get out of something. Is it great to have a 1 MOA rifle and be able to talk about how you've been able to squeeze such great accuracy out of it and all those types of things? Yes, but that is making accuracy the only worthy pursuit in shooting, and I don't think that's the case. I think the shooting culture in the Second Amendment community has changed over the years. Growing up, I shot handguns at 25 yards. I plinked with rifles at 50 and 100. We zeroed our, since we're in Ohio, we zeroed our slug guns and our black powder rifles at 100, and that was the extent of it. The vast majority of our time was spent working on the trap range with shotguns so that we could upland bird and game hunt and all those types of things. So I remember a time when shooting tactically was something that like crazy people who were talking to God on two-way radios would go do. Now today, you know, after 20 years of conflict in the global war on terror and all those types of things, we have millions of veterans at this point. We have tons of training schools that have popped up from guys who fought in the wars and gained a lot of experience, picked up some new knowledge, and are looking to expand it to people who have an interest in being able to gain that knowledge, regardless of whether or not they join the military. And that's great. Fantastic. It's really cool that we're able to get access to this information and be able to enjoy our sport. So accuracy is not the only worthy goal. What about ambidextrous type setups, so that as you're switching back and forth between shoulders, doing more tactical movement type shooting, you can actually flow with the rifle and be a little bit more transparent in your capabilities? What about reliability? You know, you'll see someone buy a $2,000 rifle and automatically expect that it's going to be sub MOA, but what if it's made of materials that mitigate the possibility of parts breakage or prolongs parts wear? Perhaps it has a self-lubricating capability that makes the weapon system ultra-reliable and shoots smoothly and all those types of things. Those are worthy pursuits just as much as sub-MOA accuracy. Quality materials and excellent machining are also important. not just accuracy. All right, guys. Well, I think that pretty much concludes what it is I wanted to cover in this particular video. I hope you guys found this interesting, and have a good day.